Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. We're here for another monthly vlog for the month of December 2022. I can't believe we've come to the end of the year already. It's just 1 week before the big day of Christmas Day. I'm here in a new location today. First of all though, most welcome here if you are a new subscriber to West Country Wanderings. And just very briefly, if you haven't watched one of my monthly vlogs before, I come to a new location that I haven't been to before in the West Country area, tell you a little bit about it, show you a little bit around. I'll also then go through some bits and pieces that have been happening on my channel in the previous month. I'll also be reading out some of the very best comments during the month too from you, my wonderful subscribers and viewers. So hopefully you can stick around for that. So where are we today? Well, behind me lies Tydenham Manor. It was actually built in 2005, but on the sites of previous manors, including a Saxon one. Yes, we're in the village of Tydenham, which is in Gloucestershire. In fact, it's in the far southwestern corner of the county. We're actually close to Wales, very close to the town of Chepstow. We're quite close to both the A48, the Chepstow-Gloucester Road, and the River Severn. Of course, you'll be familiar with that as you've been watching my channel. We're going to have a tour around here. There's actually something really interesting on the other side of the footpath in this wood as well. It is a bit difficult to show you because there's fence as well, but I can show you through some photographs as well, and I'll tell you about what's been happening there. Now, before I show you the fence on the other side of the wood here, little copse just close to the church, and we'll have a look at the church as well here at Tydenham, is this. I actually don't know what this is. It looks like a Second World War air raid shelter, but judging by the brickwork, I think it's much older, probably something to do with mining. We're in the Forest of Dean, that's the other thing I forgot to mention. We're on the edge of the Forest of Dean here, Forest of Dean district. And although this isn't a heavily wooded area, there were some mining that took place in this area. And I'm wondering if this was linked to an old mine. There's also lots of geological features which I'll come on to mention in today's monthly vlog. But you have this lovely brickwork just on the top of this. The steps just go down, does go a bit dark in there, but I think it's been blocked off, so perhaps it was a chamber that goes on somewhere else. There's also on the other side a locked, well, type of grid door. Perhaps it's like that because of bats, I would imagine. I think it's now just used as a storeroom for wood. Now, just the other side of these parallel fences here, you have a very deep quarry. In fact, it's called House Quarry. It wasn't originally had water in it when it was being used. In fact, it closed, I think, at 1990. In 1990, well, up to 1990, it was actually rail served from the Wye Valley Railway, which left the main line between Gloucester and Chepstow, just north of it. At the Wye Valley Junction, made its way here to Tydenham. And that closed in 1959. In fact, it goes all the way up through Tintern, whereas you can see a station there over on the Welsh side, and then it made its way up to Monmouth. It would have been an absolutely beautiful line to have travelled on. There was big campaigns to keep it going, but sadly it closed. But there was that short stub that served the quarry here, House Quarry. As I say, that closed in 1990. More about the railway in a bit. There's more of that to show you. This was then later on, I think it was around the millennium, became the National Diving Centre because obviously the quarry was completely flooded. You had that water in it, made it a completely self-contained environment for people to go diving and exploring. And it was the water there, it was very, very deep. Now that actually closed at the beginning of this year. Beginning of 2022, and that's where things have got really interesting because this quarry, and sadly I can't show you because of the embankment and the fences and the CCTV here and anything, and I certainly ain't going to try and get in there. It has been taken over by a company which are researching into submersible living. Yes, you heard that right, actually living underwater. They're actually building pods inside this quarry. That's hence the security. They don't want anybody seeing this because obviously for industrial espionage, that type of thing. So they can actually start people, if they so wish, to live underwater. Not necessarily in quarries, but maybe in the sea. Perhaps there's a future way of doing it. And perhaps it's a new thing we've heard about, the billionaires going into space. Perhaps this is the next form of space, living underwater. It's not something particularly appeals to me. I like to be in the woods and the fresh air and the countryside. But yeah, so they're experimenting to see how can they build these pods to enable people to live underwater. Absolutely fascinating. So now in following the Gloucestershire way, coming out of Tydenham, skirting around that quarry I was talking about. Daybreak Quarry is just over there, in fact. You're probably thinking, oh, that looks like a railway bridge. Indeed it is. In fact, we're on the Wye Valley Greenway. This was the Wye Valley Railway, which once ran from the junction, that Wye Valley junction just to the north of Chepstow, right across through Tydenham towards Tintern. And there is a bridge that's being repaired at Tintern currently, so this isn't accessible. It's also not accessible for another reason, going in a northerly direction, or sort of a northerly direction, because of Tydenham Tunnel. Now, Tydenham Tunnel is been restored and it is accessible, but only during the spring and summer months. I think it's 1st of May, end of September. One of the reasons for that is bats. I'll insert a photo of a poster I've just taken, which is just behind me there. But we're going to make our way towards the entrance of Tydenham Tunnel. I can certainly show you that, but I say we won't be able to get through it on this particular occasion, but it is an area we'll certainly return to in a future video here on West Country Wanderings. Now, in case you're wondering what that structure was behind me, it's literally just some props to prop up this bridge. It's only a minor lane, but I imagine it carries some heavy tractors from time to time, but nothing's been going across it since I've been filming at this location. But yeah, it's just to secure the bridge so it remains in place and it doesn't come tumbling down on some cyclists whizzing their way towards Tydenham Tunnel. And while it's nice and quiet here, just by the Wye Valley route, the Greenway, I just thought to tell you about what's been happening on the channel. The first video that arrived, actually probably arrived in November, so because obviously this is a shorter month, I'm having to do the vlog early because of, you know what, Christmas and New Year and all that type of thing. The first one was Cotswold Walks number 11, and I took a trip to the lovely town of Northleach in the middle of the Cotswolds, close to the main road between Cheltenham and Oxford. And we did a lovely little short walk there, shortish walk, because obviously we don't have the daylight these days, this time of year to do it. And we headed out towards Farmington. I particularly enjoyed those views of the Vale there with a stream going through it. It was very reminiscent of like a Yorkshire Dale type landscape more than a Cotswold landscape. Had some real interest in that video, and I'll just read to you the top comment, or I think is a top comment, from a gentleman called Malcolm Richardson, and he writes, "Thank you for a delightful walk, Paul, and some marvellous views of Northleach and its surroundings. Farmington and its church look absolutely splendid." That's where I stopped to have my lunch there. "I did a somewhat shorter and rather less scenic circular route to Hampnet years ago. Northleach is a Cotswold gem and well worth the hazards of rural bus travel to visit and wander around." Thank you, Malcolm. Well, thank you, Malcolm, for writing it. I do appreciate all your comments. Really good to see that. And the village that Malcolm mentioned in the comment there is Hampnet, and that's one we will visit on a future video here on West Country Wanderings. Now we'll continue our walk closer towards the tunnel. Now, Tydenham Tunnel is just a little bit further around where the line was. It goes under a bridge. We'll have a look at that as well next. And we can tell that we're now in a cutting. The line is going deeper down. The land is rising above us before we enter the hill and make our way across to the Wye Valley, which we won't be doing today, unfortunately, here on West Country Wanderings. We will do on a future video when the tunnel reopens. Before I do that, just wanted to tell you what the next video was on my channel for the month of December, and that was Wilson Barks number 2, canal number 2. Second time we've done a video on the Wilson Barks on the channel. The first one was at the little village of Siddington, where it connects up to the Kennington Avon Canal. This time in that video I went to the town of Royal Wootton Bassett in Wiltshire, and we looked at the restored section there, and I also talked about some of the history of the canal too. Well, that video seems to have gone down really well. I've got an interesting comment to read to you from one of my regular subscribers and commenters, a lady called Kathy Dye. Hi Kathy, and thank you for your comment. And Kathy writes, "Thanks Paul, interesting to hear the history of that canal. Beautiful autumnal scenery." And this was, like, we had some real deep autumnal colours when I was making that video. "I know exactly where the canal joined the Thames at Abingdon." Now, Abingdon's actually where we're going to be going to next on our journey along the Wilson Barks Canal, as I have walked in that area often. So I'm looking forward to that Abingdon Canal video in due course. Yes, indeed, Kathy, that will be happening as soon as, well, we get the lighter days and warmer days, because obviously it takes a little bit of time to do a more in-depth canal video, but hopefully that will be arriving in the early springtime. Now, surprisingly, you can still see quite a few of the original sleepers if you look in the embankments here, the original wooden sleepers. And we also had some rails further down that way, although I think they may have been repositioned to allow the track to be clear for the cyclists. Let's go and have a closer look at the tunnel. So before you get to the tunnel entrance itself, you have this beautiful curved arch bridge carrying a minor road out of the village of Tydenham. Let's have a closer look. The other thing to mention here, though, is the rocks that have been cut out on either side here, this deep cutting before we get to the tunnel portal here at Tydenham. Now, something you might be surprised to see on the entrance of the tunnel is a sign saying "No lights, please." And the reason for that is because of the bat population that make Tydenham Tunnel their home. So we're now standing underneath the entrance to the tunnel. Well, things have got a little bit darker, so I hope you still should be able to see me because the light's facing that way, should be okay. So as you can see there, you've got these gates here which prevent access to the tunnel at this time of the year. As I say, the reason for that is to protect the bats, but it's just impressive to see the engineering that went on to build this tunnel here quite close to the Wye Valley and also the River Severn. So while I'm here at the entrance to Tydenham Tunnel, I'll just tell you about the next video in my series. That was at West Somerset, and I went down to West Somerset to actually do another video, which I'll mention in a bit. And on the morning of my drive down, I stopped at a place called Lilstock Beach. Never been there before. It's actually a very, very remote place, nearly as remote as that one we did on the Lizard just a few weeks ago back in Cornwall. Lilstock Beach is in the Bristol Channel, and it's where the channel, the Severn, has obviously entered into the river, into the sea, should I say, the river, the Celtic Sea. And it's extending further and further away from South Wales at that point. Indeed, I couldn't see South Wales at all when I was making that video because of it being so misty. And one of the main features of that beach was the magnificent limestone pavement. And I have a top comment I'd like to read to you from a gentleman called John Timbrell, who writes many comments on my channel, some brilliant comments. Thank you, John, and thank you for supporting the channel. I'll read that to you now. And John puts, "I was surprised to see a pier at Hinkley Point. So I went back to an earlier Google Earth photos to find a partially built pier in 2018. Yes, that was a really interesting comment because I saw the pier there when I was making that video, jutting out from Hinkley Point, and I had assumed, falsely, it's always a dangerous thing to assume, of course, that that pier had been there for a long, long time. In fact, it hadn't. It wasn't actually completed until 2020, just 2 years ago. And the reason for the pier being built is to enable aggregates and building materials to be brought into shore so they can carry on building with the Hinkley Point nuclear power project. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Thank you very much, John, for your comment. And as I say, it enabled me to do some further digging to get that. Just as an aside, there is a little port close to that. Name escapes me now. I'll put that in the bottom, which is also reopened again too. And that's also to bring in building materials for the same power station. Now, before I head back into the village and have a look around the church, grab some lunch as well, a warm cup of tea from my thermos because I need it. It's really, really getting quite chilly again now. Just wanted to show you this bit here. heading down towards the entrance to the National Dive Centre. I'm not sure the arrangements are for parking there now to access the greenways. If I can find that out, I'll check on that, as I say, because it has been sold to that person that's doing the developing of those underwater pods. So if I'll check on that, but that's heading down in direction of Chepstow. I thought I'd mention the next video that appeared on my channel for the month of December, and that was Pinnerton Garden, or Pinnerton Gardens, I'm never quite sure which one it is. And that was the last one of the batch of little films that I shot when I was down in Cornwall some 5 or 6 weeks ago now. But when I shot that, you still had a lot of autumnal colour, and it was really quite mild. Actually, unbelievably, it was 15 degrees, although we are promised some warmer weather later this week as we head into Christmas Day itself. That video has been pretty well received, perhaps not so much as the other ones on my channel, like the canals and the railways, those sort of things, and the walking ones, but a lot of people did like it. There was a lot of likes and there was a lot of comments, and I'll just read you one of those comments now. In fact, it was from a couple of other YouTubers called Tea in Valhalla. They're well worth checking out. Highly recommend Tea in Valhalla. It's a good channel. They said, thanks for the lovely video. The one especially called Cat's Attention. What a fantastic looking garden. Indeed it was. I was so lucky to catch it on such a nice day. Now I'm currently standing by the church. The church is actually in front of me. Sadly, it's closed today. It's open for regular services on a Sunday at 9:30 a.m. It says it features a choir, which is quite a rare thing today. I'll tell you more about the church in a minute. Just behind me there is the River Severn, or rather the Severn Estuary, as it widens, and we'll be seeing more of that next year as I continue along the Severn Way, making way south from the town of Ironbridge, heading towards Bridgnorth. And I do apologise for not being able to bring you content with that, because it's just too short a days under the, it's been icy and very muddy underfoot too. Just to tell you a little bit more about this village of Tydenham, in Saxon times it was known as Tydenham, D-Y-D-D-A-N-H-A-M-M-E. I'll put the spelling of that below. I think that's how it's pronounced. In fact, Tydenham is one of, or Tydenham, whichever you prefer, was one of the most documented Saxon villages in the entirety of England. And the church behind me was originally a Saxon church. It's actually built on Saxon foundations, though it was heavily restored in the middle of the 19th century, so it obviously has a very, very Victorian feel to it inside. If I can get a photo of it inside from the web, I'll insert that round about there, but it's a very delightful position high above the River Severn here. Well, I'm now quite close to the manor house again. These are the original, probably not original. These were built to protect or to cover up the manor house in its original incarnation prior to the one built in 2005. Remember I said that it's built on the site of a Saxon manor house. I'm sure it's been excavated at some point with Time Team or similar. If I can find any information, whatever they found on that, I'll put that in below. But it's still a very commanding manor, even though it's a modern manor house. It's been very done in a very tasteful style with beautiful landscape gardens. I have this lovely little archway here, and there's also some land here which I think belongs to the village. It certainly doesn't say private, and there's a gate. We'll have a look at that shortly. Before I do any of that though, I'll mention the next video on my channel, and I think it was the second most popular viewed video on the channel this month, for the month of December, and it's one of a trio of Christmassy videos that I've done. This one I linked up with Louise from Southwest Sundays. It was good to meet up with Louise again, and we went round the village of Dunster in West Somerset, and they have a very, very special candlelight evening. It has a terrific atmosphere there. It was just so Christmassy, and thank you Louise for really helping and contributing to that video. Louise also made a video on that evening as well. If you haven't checked out Louise's video of it, then I'll put the link into the description of today's vlog too. Had a really good comment on that as well. It's from a lady called Faith G, one of my regular correspondents here on West Country Wanderings, and I'll just read to you now what she wrote. Well, there I was decking my halls with boughs of holly when this arrived, i.e. my video. Just when you think that Dunster couldn't look any more delightful, the Candlelight celebrations start. The singers in Dunster Church were superb. If you haven't yet seen that video, what I did, we went into the church together and watched and filmed some of the singers that they had there. I put in the name of the singers as well, because I didn't actually title it in my video, and they were superb. And I then left the camera recording and I just did it as audio, enhanced it a little bit and put that as the closing sequence. And I thought they were absolutely delightful singers. Indeed, the whole evening, absolutely wonderful. The community really came together to put together a really tremendous special event for Christmas time. The sixth video this month was one of my railway series. I decided that we hadn't had enough railway content for a little time, but of course it needed to be seasonal, because it was the second one in my trio of Christmas films. So I headed down to the Wye Valley Steam Railway, which is at a place called Bitton in South Gloucestershire, about 4 or 5 miles from Bath and about 8 miles or so from the city of Bristol, something like that anyway. And I headed down there and they had the Santa specials running. They'd actually sold out weeks, possibly months before. It was really good to see that. When I arrived, the snow was actually come down. It was artificial snow, but it did look very affected. Of course, we've had the real thing since I filmed that a couple of weeks ago there. And it had a great atmosphere. All of the children and adults were really enjoying themselves, and people particularly commented on the scenes of the people waiting to board the train. You could see the excitement in their faces and the atmosphere with the Christmas music playing across the tunnel, snow coming down, and the Christmas toys that the children have been given when they went to the North Pole. I can't remember whether there was the Avon Bridge station or the other one at the other end of the railway line, but either way they were having a great time there. And that video is actually the most viewed video for this month. I had a great comment from one of my regular commentators, Michael Pilling, who lives in Poland. And I'll read what he says because it has a direct connection to the video. He says, "Hello Paul, greetings from Poland. What a surprise, a piece of Poland in South Gloucestershire. Who would have thought it?" Now, the reason he says that is that the engine that was featured in that video was called Carol, normally spelled C-A-R-O-L. But it was spelled K-A-R-E-L. In fact, the E between the R and the L was actually a spelling mistake when it was made, but they decided to keep it anyway. It was actually named after the first Polish Pope. Was it John Paul II, I think, 1978. And because obviously the locomotive being Polish, he thought it'd be an appropriate name, although it does have that spelling mistake there. Most delightful little locomotive that had an incredible life, and it had been working in some steelworks in southwestern Poland for a lot of it. And a gentleman whose name escapes me, I'll put it in below, went over on a trip. You could do these trips in the 1980s prior to the Berlin Wall coming down. Poland was starting to open up to the west then, and they were running these trips so you could see, because Poland was running a lot of steam still, particularly on its industrial railways. And this gentleman saw this little locomotive working hard in the steelworks inside it and decided to buy it because they were getting rid of their steam locomotives and going over to diesel. And it's such a fantastic thing that he restored it, and it's been working on the Avon Valley line now for some 10 years. What I particularly liked about it was the noise that little locomotive made. It was tremendous. Really did enjoy recording the sound on that one. Now from this point here you can actually see the top of the original Severn Bridge that carries the M48, was the M4, and it became the M48 when the second Severn crossing was completed. And it obviously goes from Almondsbury interchange M5 across to the town of Chepstow and thence into South Wales. You can just make that out there. But I'm really impressed with this village in terms of has a real rustic very, very quiet place to film, which is always an absolute advantage. I'm just going to have a little tour around before I talk about both what's coming up in January and next year on West Country Wanderings, and also what the final video was, but not quite the final video of the month to land on my channel. So we have another lovely view just off this footpath, slightly to the south of the village centre, away from the church. And of course that is the river there, looking upstream in the direction of Gloucester on the opposite bank of the river there. We've got Sharpness Docks, somewhere we will explore in more detail when we do the Severn Way, working its way south. So which brings me on to the topic of what's coming up in the month of January and the new year here on West Country Wanderings. We've got lots of exciting things planned for you, not least of which the aforementioned return to the Severn Way. It may happen in January, depends on the weather. It may go into February or March. Also depends on the rainfall, of course, because of the nature of the river and its tendency to flood, but I can't wait to return to that. I'll also be coming back in this area to explore more of the Forest of Dean here in southwest Gloucestershire. Although I live in Gloucestershire, I haven't really explored this area very much. In fact, the only other time I've done a video in in the Forest of Dean, should I say, was about 4 or 5 months ago. I did a monthly vlog not far from here, about 10 miles to north, near the town of Colford. And that was my only other exploration video of this area. So we need to do it more in depth, particularly be coming back to Tydenham again, this area, because just over the way, just a mile from the centre of this village, is an abandoned village with an abandoned church that still stands. I'm really looking forward to having a look at that. There's also one of the largest cave formations in the whole of England. There's some fantastic woods, and there's much else besides, including the Devil's Pulpit, which is a fantastic viewpoint looking down into Wales and Tintern Abbey. So we'll definitely be coming back to this area again. I've been really impressed with this area. It's not taken me long, only about 35-40 minutes. Hopping over the Severn Bridge is the quickest way to get to this part of southwest Gloucestershire. So really enjoying that. There'll also be some more Cotswold walks. That was good, and I will be back into both Devon and Cornwall again. In fact, we'll be going back to Cornwall to look at some more of the old railway lines there. There'll be another Thames and Severn Canal update because they've started work in the Whitminster area, uncovering a lock, a Westfield lock. So we'll be doing something with, certainly we're doing something with that, and also be back on the Wilts and Berks Canal at Abingdon in Oxfordshire. So all that's coming soon here on West Country Wanderings. Well, that brings me to talk about my final video that I made in the month of December, and that was Christmas in the Cotswolds, or Cotswold Christmas, whichever you prefer. I couldn't never decide what to actually call it, but whichever. I think actually it was finally called Christmas in the Cotswolds, but the titles may have said something different. Been particularly well received video, because Cotswolds are always really popular, aren't they? And particularly people were commenting on the photography in that video, and what I was doing was using nighttime photography camera on the tripod, using very long shutter speeds. You have to shut it down into manual because autofocus doesn't work when you're having shutter speeds of 20 seconds and it's so dark it can't actually use the grading to do the contrast comparison, to do the focusing properly. So you're doing that, and it's obviously it takes time, so I did get quite cold doing that, making that video, but I really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoyed seeing the red deer again. They were very reminiscent of reindeer, weren't they? And that was really great to see those again, and also the views from the top near the tower at Broadway. I particularly enjoyed that. Anyway, the top comment for that video goes to David Bellamy, who lives in Spain. Hi David, and hopefully it's a little bit more warmer in Spain than it is here in Gloucestershire at the moment. Hi Paul, you've captured the spirit on this one. Both towns were tastefully illuminated, and the Cotswold Oolite is a wonderful backdrop to any photo. Yeah, indeed it is. You can't really go wrong with taking photographs around Cotswold towns and villages. The music at the start, was it from the film A Night Before Christmas? Now that got me thinking, because I didn't really know the answer to that question, so I went back and had a look and see what music I use. I've got I download quite a few tracks from YouTube's library, which are obviously free to use, free to cost, and I just store them on my laptop. And obviously there's a whole range of ones you can use for Christmas time. It turns out that particular one is called Carol of the Bells, not Canon, but there was one called Canon of the Bells, but one was called Carol of the Bells. And I found out, and I didn't know this at the time when I used it, that it was by a Ukrainian composer called, now this is going to be terrible pronunciation, I do apologise, Mykola Leontogic. I think that's right. And it was composed in 1919, and indeed it has been used in many Hollywood films, including Home Alone and A Muppet's Christmas Carol. Yeah, so it's been used many times over. In fact, the piece of music that I used, although that was the music, it was actually performed by a gentleman called Jason Shaw, who's an American, sometimes goes under the moniker Audionautics. He's got many pieces of music on YouTube Library, which are free to use. And they are really good. So yeah, that was the story behind the music in that video. Well, that's the end of today's monthly vlog and the end of the vlogs for the year 2022. Just before I close, before I forget, I just want to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas. I hope you have a brilliant time. We'll be on to do a Happy New Year's greeting between Christmas and New Year. In fact, look out for a very special video on the channel on Christmas Eve. Another little Christmassy one. It'll be a short one, not a long one, but just to wish you Christmas on just before the big day itself. I haven't actually filmed that yet. I'm going to hope to do that the next couple of days. I won't say any more about that, so you'll have to look out for that one. Also, I'd like to thank you very much for watching any of my videos during the course of 2022. I really do appreciate it. The channel has grown somewhat, certainly passed over the 1,000 subscriber point, and we're now heading to 1,200 subscribers. So I thank you for each and every one of you for your contribution to that, and also your terrific comments, which really keep me going, and also your shares and your likes too. It all really helps to keep the channel going and keeping it growing too. All the best for now. Take care of yourselves and look forward to seeing you just the other side of Christmas, apart from that little Christmas video that'll pop up sometime on Christmas Eve. Take care. Bye bye now. Cheers.